Welcome to Politics News Wolf US channel. The tension of the Ukraine-Russia war is also escalating in the second week of January. Military and financial support protector of the Kiev army in the new year. Upgraded weapons are on the way. The West remains resolute, and the Ukrainian army continues to maneuver and overwhelm Russian. Ukraine shows that its future is bright from high morale among the army, defending its homeland's superior leadership, cohesion, and seemingly unwavering Western support. Ukraine's advantages are also evident on the battlefield. Combined with the Ukraine's theory defensive effort backed by Western military assistance, this forced Alotki to retake thousands of kilometers of territory previously occupied by the Russians and turn the tide of the war in its favor. As long as Western support remains strongly, we think Ukraine could recapture all or most of the territory occupied by Russia. Ukraine may even liberate all of its territory, including the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia occupied and annexed in 2014. We can believe that Ukraine has gained the reversible momentum, and there is basically nothing the Russians can do to change that unless they find a way to persuade the West to lose interest. If 2023 continues as it, there is a good chance that Ukraine will honor President Pdi Zelensky's New Year's pledge to reclaim all of Ukraine by the end of the year, or at least land to definitely end the Russian threat. But while Zelensky urged Ukrainians to expect victory this year, President Vladimir Putin used his New Year's speeches to prepare the Russians for a tough battle. Russian troops are digging 45 defensive positions with at 100,000 nearly mobilized soldiers. And while it seems unlikely that Russia will seize more territory anytime soon, it will be harder for Ukraine to make progress in 2023 than last year. In the second week of January, striking developments continue to occur in the Ukrainian war. There is rarely time left until the anniversary of the Russian near Putin's invasion of. After more than 10 months of war, neither Russia nor Ukraine seems ready to start negotiations to end the war. Both talked about what conditions had to be met in order to reach a peace agreement. In summary, it is possible to say both countries have conditions, and these conditions are almost impossible to accept in the current process. In the Ukraine war, which has been going on for about a year, the losses of the Russian army multiplied exponentially. Western officials have estimated for months that Russia is at risk of running out of ammunition, and while that has yet to happen, there is a persistent evidence that Russian supplies are low. The Ukrainian officials announced late last year that the rate of artillery fire for the Moscow army on the eastern was only one-third of the rate during the summer months when Russian troops were on the offensive. Kiev military units are literally liquidating the Moscow army. November was one of the fiercest months of the 10-month war in Ukraine. In 30 days, the Russian army lost about 15,000 soldiers. Despite a highly active November, December was an even more deadly month for Russian army in trouble. Kiev claims to have purged more than 111,000 Moscow army soldiers, in addition to the Russian soldiers who lost their lives. The number of wounded soldiers in the Moscow army is too high to be underestimated. So if you go double or triple the number of casualties for each unit killed, the Ukrainians claim to have inflicted a total of 330,000 to 440,000 casualties on the Russian forces. When we look at the casualty report of the Moscow army, it is hard not to see that Vladimir Putin is cornered. While the declining troops of the Moscow army terrify Putin, the Russian leader makes a breakthrough to put a stop to the bad course, having no military left in Ukraine. War of Lair. Putin is dependent on Chez Ram. Ram heads a notorious paramilitary group known as the or VU, and is accused of numerous human rights violations. But the Chechen leader, Denis OV, is supported by the Kremlin. The support and man of Vladimir Putin turns Karo from scratch into your hero. Russia is sending 300 Chechen soldiers to the front line. To reinforce the failed operation, Moscow placed about 300 Chechen soldiers on the front lines of the war. As the Kremlin's invasion efforts continued, Kremlin leader Ramarov announced that fighters of the southern Russian National Guard had left the airport in Krony, the capital of Chechnya. It is hardly possible to say that the Chechen fighters made a great contribution to the Russian invasion effort and that Karo personally invested heavily in the war, because the losses of the Chechens in this war are as high as the Russians. When we hit the ratio, Putin is trying to make up for the losses he took in the Ukraine war with the Che. We will wait and see how much success Karo's military units can achieve in this process. But pro-Ukrainian Chechen fighters are also working against Karo's forces within the country's borders. As it turns out, the Ukrainian war is about to turn into a war in which Karo troops break each other. Tensions continue to escalate in the Ukraine war while Russia is bleeding from its wounds. The Western allies are announcing their new aid package too. The US and German governments announced last Thursday that two countries will send an array of additional weapons to Ukraine, which continues to fend off a nearly a year-long offense there by invading Russian forces. The latest military aid package will also include the first batch of radar-guided Sea Sparrow air defense missiles, including the supply of a number of Western tanks, one of the biggest wish list items for the Ukrainian defense forces. Since the start of the war, it'll be launched from land or sea against country attacks with aircraft cruise missiles, which have become the cornerstone of the Russian. The Ukrainian military recently managed to adjust their existing Soviet-era back launchers to fire the Sea Sparrow, the new missile supplies, also helping to fill a visible need for the Ukrainian military as Russia begins to resort to heavier bombings to compensate for large frontline troop losses. Ukraine's missile defense relied on short and medium-range National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, and was made as 300 missile defense systems as the primary protection against incoming enemy air attacks. While less versatile than the U.S. Navy favorite, the Sea Sparrow of the S-300 was generally formally considered a superior defense system, but the Sea Sparrow seems to outshine the Russians' defense systems. Today's when the Ukrainian armed forces will inflict hell on its rival Russia when the Sea Spiral of defense system are very close. We look forward to what the Ukraine war will witness in the coming. We anticipate that Ukraine may retake some areas this year, but not enough to secure the scissor victory. Russia, neither. Putin appears to be only doubling down on his determination to subdue Ukraine. While Russia currently lacks the capacity to launch successful attacks, the injection of newly mobilized manpower strengthens Ukraine's ability to hold its advance. Unfortunately, we do not think that 2023 will be the last year of the war. If the front lines do not change significantly in the coming year, the road ahead could become even darker. The economies of both Russia and Ukraine will have a hard time waging along. And it is unclear whether each country can produce enough manpower for a prolonged struggle. We know that Ukraine now has the advantage that despite its small size, it has millions of multi-aged men. While Russia is pulling convicts out of prisons to maintain a frontline prisons, we do not anticipate that Ukraine will give up or lose completely to Russia. Ukrainians are determined to. Meanwhile, the fate of Ukraine will become more dependent than ever on arrivals beyond its controls, such as the determination of the West, the availability of the West's arsenal and events in Russia. Thank you for watching the video. If you find it useful, please comment and share the video for us. It will make our channel more known. See you in the following videos. Thank you very much.